The desert sun baked the ruins of Alexandria as Dr. Adrian Cole brushed the sand from his cracked notebook, staring at the faded sketch of an ancient papyrus fragment he had recovered from the basement of the Bibliotheca Alexandrina. The sketch depicted something almost no historian dared to believe still existed, a hidden annex of the Great Library of Alexandria, buried deep beneath the city, untouched for nearly 2,000 years. For centuries, scholars had debated whether anything survived the inferno of 48 BCE, when Julius Caesar's siege had supposedly destroyed hundreds of thousands of scrolls containing the collective knowledge of ancient civilizations. But Adrian's discovery suggested something shocking: the fire had consumed only the surface archives. A secret order, calling themselves the Keepers of the Veil, had smuggled the most dangerous manuscripts away into subterranean vaults before the Roman fleets arrived. If true, these scrolls were said to contain forbidden knowledge, lost technologies, forgotten histories, ancient sciences, and even predictive prophecies. Legends whispered that whoever controlled these scrolls could reshape the course of humanity. Adrian had spent 6 years tracing obscure references, decoding temple inscriptions, and chasing rumors hidden in texts thought irrelevant by mainstream historians. Every clue led him here, to a single cryptic phrase carved on a shattered stele beneath the Serapeum ruins: "Where the light drowns, the gate awakens." Most dismissed it as poetic nonsense. But Adrian saw it differently. The light drowning was not metaphorical, but geographical. Ancient maps revealed a now submerged district near the eastern harbor, precisely where the Pharos lighthouse once stood. Something had been built there, hidden beneath centuries of sand and seawater. By nightfall, Adrian sat in his Cairo hotel room, surrounded by scattered journals and blueprints lit by a single lamp. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. It wasn't paranoia. 2 days earlier, he had spotted the same man in a black linen coat lingering outside the archives. Even now, his phone displayed a strange anonymous message received just an hour ago: "Stop searching. Some knowledge should remain buried." Adrian stared at the words, his heart pounding, but curiosity was his curse. Nothing could stop him now. By morning, he boarded a train back to Alexandria and met his old friend Layla Mansur, a brilliant linguist and epigrapher. Over steaming cups of mint tea, he slid a crumbling papyrus across the table, its edges burnt but its symbols unmistakable. Layla's eyes widened as she translated aloud: "Beneath the drowned tower lies the chamber of Thoth, guarded by those sworn to silence. The scrolls are not lost, they are hidden." Adrian leaned closer, lowering his voice. "This proves it. The keepers didn't just save the scrolls, they hid them beneath the Pharos." Layla hesitated, her brow furrowed. "Do you understand what you're implying? That thousands of manuscripts, from Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, maybe even Atlantis, could still exist down there?" "Adrian, people have killed for less." She wasn't exaggerating. Historical rumors suggested that powerful organizations, secret societies, government agencies, even religious orders, had hunted for these scrolls for centuries. One name recurred in obscure archives: the Order of Seshat, a clandestine group claiming direct descent from the ancient Egyptian goddess of wisdom. According to legend, they were tasked with protecting humanity from forbidden knowledge, ensuring that certain truths never reached the surface world. If Adrian's theory was correct, he was about to walk straight into their crosshairs. That night, under a waning crescent moon, Adrian and Layla descended into the catacombs beneath Qam el-Shogafa, following coordinates he had triangulated from ancient charts. The air was thick with damp earth and the scent of saltwater, their footsteps muffled by centuries of dust. The deeper they went, the stranger the architecture became. Roman columns fused seamlessly into older Greek foundations, which in turn merged into something far more ancient, almost alien. Torchlight revealed walls etched with layered inscriptions in Greek, Demotic Egyptian, and an unknown cipher neither of them recognized. Then they reached a sealed archway carved with the same phrase Adrian had seen on the stele: "Where the light drowns, the gate awakens." Beneath it was a worn relief depicting a colossal lighthouse with spiraling waves beneath its base. Layla traced the patterns with trembling fingers. "It's a map," she whispered. "Look, this spiral marks an underwater entrance. It's directly below the ruins of the Pharos." Before they could study it further, a faint echo of footsteps behind them froze them in place. Shadows flickered across the far wall. Adrian extinguished the torch, pulling Layla into an alcove, holding his breath as the sound drew closer. A pair of figures emerged from the darkness, cloaked in black robes, each holding a lantern with a strange sigil etched into the glass, an open eye within a seven-pointed star. One of them knelt before the archway, touching the carved relief as if in prayer, while the other muttered in a language Adrian couldn't place. Then, without warning, they both turned sharply, their faces partially hidden beneath their hoods, and raised their lanterns, scanning the catacomb walls. Adrian's pulse thundered in his ears. He and Layla remained perfectly still, barely daring to breathe. The robed figures paused, listening, as though sensing their presence. Then one of them spoke in flawless Arabic, "The Seekers are close." The other nodded grimly. "The Grand Keeper warned us. If they cross the threshold, the seal must be destroyed." As the figures disappeared deeper into the catacombs, Layla grabbed Adrian's arm, her voice barely a whisper. "Did you hear that? They called us Seekers. They know we're here." Adrian nodded, his jaw tightening. "And if they destroy the seal before we reach it, the scrolls will be lost forever." They hurried back toward the surface, emerging into the humid night air near the harbor. The Mediterranean shimmered under moonlight, waves lapping gently against the ruins where the Pharos lighthouse once stood. Adrian stared at the dark waters, knowing that somewhere beneath lay a secret humanity had been denied for 2 millennia. But now, he wasn't the only one searching. As dawn broke, Adrian arranged for a private dive team led by Captain Hassan, a former Egyptian naval officer who owed him a favor from a past expedition. They secured permits under the guise of marine archaeological research, but Adrian kept the true purpose hidden. When Hassan asked, Adrian simply said they were studying Roman trade routes. Yet even as they prepared their gear, he noticed 2 black SUVs parked near the dock, unmarked, their tinted windows reflecting the rising sun. Whoever they weren't journalists or tourists. That evening, Adrian checked into his temporary quarters aboard the research vessel Nereid, where he spread his notes across the cabin table. He traced a finger along the map, stopping at a small X marked 50 meters below sea level, directly beneath the ruins of the lighthouse's foundation. This was the rumored Chamber of Thoth, named after the Egyptian god of knowledge, where the missing scrolls were said to be entombed. Layla leaned over his shoulder, whispering nervously, "Adrian, if this is real, if we find even a fraction of those manuscripts, do you realize what it means? Entire chapters of human history rewritten overnight. Lost technologies rediscovered. Knowledge people have been killed to suppress." Adrian looked at her gravely. "That's exactly why we have to find them before anyone else does." Neither noticed the small blinking red light beneath the table, a listening device, carefully planted among his papers. Somewhere, miles away, in a dimly lit chamber lined with towering shelves of ancient tomes, a hooded figure watched their every move through a grainy live feed. Before him, carved into the stone wall, hung the sigil of the 7-pointed star. He whispered into a hidden communicator, "The Seekers have found the entrance. Activate the sentinels. The library must remain hidden." The pale dawn light bled across the Mediterranean as the research vessel Nereid rocked gently in the soft current, anchored less than a kilometer from the ruins of the ancient Pharos lighthouse. The sea was calm, but Adrian Cole could feel a strange weight pressing on his chest, as though the water itself knew what secrets they were about to disturb. The dive team assembled their gear in silence, the air thick with tension. Layla sat cross-legged on the deck, her hands trembling slightly as she tightened the straps of her oxygen tank, while Captain Hassan barked instructions to his crew. Beneath them lay 2,000 years of silence, and possibly, humanity's greatest untold history. Adrian's notes had pinpointed the submerged ruins where ancient records hinted at an entryway, a spiral staircase carved into the bedrock beneath the lighthouse's foundation. No one had dived there before, the Egyptian government had marked the area as restricted decades ago. But Adrian knew the stakes. If the Order of Seshat reached the Chamber of Thoth first, the scrolls could vanish forever. By 6:30 a.m., the divers were ready. Adrian and Layla double-checked their underwater comms, secured their waterproof satchels for artifacts, and slid into the steel-blue water. The Mediterranean swallowed them whole, muffling the world above into a distant hum. Shafts of golden sunlight pierced through shifting currents, illuminating fallen marble blocks and eroded statues littering the seafloor, silent remnants of Alexandria's lost glory. Schools of silver fish darted between ancient columns, and here and there, fragments of mosaic tiles still clung stubbornly to submerged walls. It was hauntingly beautiful, but Adrian's mind was fixed on the coordinates glowing faintly on his wrist console. The deeper they descended, the colder and darker it became, until even the sunlight above dissolved into shadows. Then he saw it, a half-buried relief etched into a basalt slab, depicting the same spiral staircase carved into a circle. Around it were glyphs Layla recognized instantly. Adrian, her voice crackled softly over comms, it's the Mark of Thoth. This is it. We're close. But before they could move forward, Captain Hassan's voice broke through the static, urgent and sharp. Adrian, surface radar just picked up 2 unidentified vessels approaching fast. No IDs, no permits. Get what you can and prepare to board. Adrian's jaw clenched. It's them, he muttered under his breath, scanning the murky depths. Somewhere behind them, shadows stirred, divers moving silently, fast, cutting through the water like predators. Layla turned, spotting the glint of black wetsuits and spear guns strapped to their legs. Order operatives, she whispered. The keepers had found them. Adrian gestured for the team to scatter, activating the emergency light strapped to his wrist. A brilliant pulse of blue illuminated the seabed, and that's when they saw it. Half hidden beneath coral and sand, an enormous circular stone door loomed, nearly 5 meters across, engraved with complex geometric patterns unlike any seen in Egyptian architecture. At its center was a 7-pointed star with an inset keyhole, and below it, an inscription in 3 languages, Greek, Demotic, and a third cipher no modern historian had ever translated. Layla drifted closer, tracing her glove across the symbols, her voice trembling with awe. This is older than the lighthouse, older than Alexandria itself. Adrian, this door wasn't built by the Ptolemies. It predates them by centuries, maybe millennia. Before Adrian could reply, a muffled explosion shook the water behind them, scattering silt clouds in every direction. One of Hassan's divers spun out of control as a shockwave rippled past. The Order's operatives were deploying sonic charges to disorient them underwater. Adrian and Layla ducked behind a fallen column, adrenaline pounding in their veins. Through the foggy silt, they glimpsed 3 black-suited figures approaching the stone door, carrying a strange metal device that emitted pulses of golden light. One of them spoke through a helmet comm, voice deep and authoritative, "Initiate the seal protocol. Nothing leaves this chamber." Layla grabbed Adrian's wrist, whispering fiercely, "They're going to destroy the entrance." Adrian's mind raced. The stone door had no visible hinges or handles, its locking mechanism was likely encoded in ancient engineering no one had deciphered. But what if the key wasn't physical? He remembered the phrase etched on the steel in the Serapeum, "Where the light drowns, the gate awakens." And now they were 50 meters below the surface, where sunlight died, yet still faint beams filtered down from above. He switched his dive torch to a concentrated beam and directed it into the 7-pointed star. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low, resonant hum that vibrated through the seabed, the star began to glow faintly, reacting to the focused light. The patterns around the door shifted, rotating in slow spirals, and a deep grinding echoed from within the rock. Layla gasped. "Adrian, you're opening it." But their triumph was short-lived. A spear sliced past them, embedding itself in the stone next to Layla's head, followed by a burst of compressed air as one of the operatives charged toward them. Adrian shoved Layla aside and swung his oxygen tank, striking the diver squarely and knocking him off balance. Another operative fired a tether line, wrapping around Adrian's arm, but before they could reel him in, Hassan's voice roared through comms, "Fall back, now." A sudden flash erupted from above as one of Hassan's divers deployed an emergency phosphor flare, flooding the seabed in blinding white light. The Order's operatives recoiled, shielding their visors, giving Adrian precious seconds to act. He swam to the door and pushed his palm against the glowing star. The spirals completed their alignment with a loud, shuddering click. Slowly, impossibly, the massive circular stone retracted into the seabed, revealing a yawning darkness beyond. Cold currents poured from within, carrying the scent of ancient air untouched since the days of Cleopatra, or perhaps far earlier. Layla floated beside him, wide-eyed. This is it," she whispered, her voice shaking with disbelief. But before they could enter, the Order regrouped. One of the robed divers shouted a phrase in the unknown language Adrian had heard in the catacombs, Karmash the Thurin. The phrase seemed to trigger something inside the chamber. A low rumble vibrated from within as faint golden lights flickered to life, one by one, illuminating an ancient spiral staircase descending deep into the earth. Suddenly, Hassan's urgent voice cut through again. "Adrian, surface now. We've got multiple inbound drones, someone's broadcasting our coordinates." Adrian hesitated, torn between safety and the discovery of a lifetime. But before he could decide, one of the Order's operatives hurled a thermal disruptor charged toward the stone mechanism, aiming to collapse the entire entrance. Acting on instinct, Adrian launched himself forward, intercepting the device midwater and hurling it away into the silt cloud just before it detonated in a muffled explosion. The blast shook the ruins violently, sending a cascade of debris raining around them. Visibility dropped to near zero, and in the chaos, the Order's operatives retreated into the darkness of the chamber, disappearing below. Adrian and Layla struggled to regroup, their lungs burning as oxygen levels dipped dangerously low. Hassan shouted over comms, "Cole! Abort the dive, now!" But Adrian's voice was steady, almost defiant. "No, they're inside already. If we surface, we lose them, and the scrolls." He grabbed Layla's arm and pointed toward the glowing spiral staircase. "We follow them." Layla hesitated, shaking her head. "Adrian, if we go down there without backup, we may not come back." Adrian's gaze hardened. "Then we make sure the knowledge isn't lost again." The two of them slipped into the entrance, leaving the modern world behind as they descended into the ancient labyrinth beneath the seabed. The water drained gradually as they went deeper, until they emerged into a vast, air-filled cavern lit by strange crystalline fixtures glowing faintly along the walls. Stalactites hung like frozen daggers above, dripping into pools that reflected the golden light in rippling patterns. At the far end of the chamber, carved into a colossal basalt arch, was a sigil Adrian had never seen before, an open eye encircled by serpents, glowing faintly with phosphorescence. Beneath it stretched a hallway lined with hundreds of sealed stone doors, each marked with strange pictographs and guarded by intricate locking mechanisms. Layla stared in stunned silence. "Adrian, this isn't just one chamber. It's a vault. A library." Before Adrian could reply, a scream echoed faintly through the corridor ahead, one of the Order's operatives. Then, the sound was abruptly cut off. Something was in there with them. Something ancient, and awake. The scream faded into an eerie silence, swallowed by the cavern's heavy air. Adrian and Layla froze, their eyes locked on the endless corridor of sealed doors. The glow from the crystalline fixtures pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat, and the sigil of the open eye above the basalt arch seemed to shimmer unnaturally, as though watching them. Layla whispered, barely audible, "Something killed them, whatever it is, it wasn't human." Adrian's instinct screamed for caution, but the deeper pull of curiosity urged him forward. He raised his flashlight, the beam cutting across carved hieroglyphs on the nearest door. They were nothing like the standard Egyptian glyphs Adrian had studied his entire career. These were angular, geometric, almost mathematical, more akin to coded formulas than language. Yet the structure was deliberate, precise, as though designed not merely to be read but to be solved. As they stepped cautiously down the corridor, Adrian noticed faint scorch marks on the stone floor, as if someone had dragged burning metal across it centuries ago. Then they came upon the source of the scream. One of the Order's operatives lay sprawled across the ground, his wetsuit torn, his chest carved open in a strange pattern. There was no blood, only a deep, cauterized mark that spiraled outward from a single point. Layla gagged, clutching her mouth. "What could have done this?" she whispered. Adrian knelt beside the body, tracing the wound with a trembling hand. Not a weapon, something else. Energy. Heat focused into a blade. Before they could speculate further, a low hum filled the corridor. The crystalline fixtures brightened, one by one, as though something deeper in the vault had awakened in response to their presence. Adrian pressed onward, his pulse pounding in his ears. At the end of the corridor, they found a chamber unlike anything they'd imagined. It was vast, circular, with a domed ceiling that disappeared into darkness. In the center stood an enormous obsidian pedestal, and on it rested a single scroll case, gilded and adorned with lapis inlay. Around it, 7 stone statues stood guard, each depicting a different figure: priests, scribes, warriors, astronomers, their eyes carved with uncanny precision that seemed to follow every movement. Layla exhaled shakily. "Adrian, do you realize what this means? If that scroll survived, then hundreds, maybe thousands more could be hidden here." But before they approached, a voice echoed across the chamber, deep, calm, and commanding. "You shouldn't have come here, Dr. Cole." From the shadows emerged a figure Adrian recognized instantly, the same robed man he had seen in the catacombs, the one who had spoken the unknown incantation. His hood was lowered now, revealing sharp features, pale skin weathered with age, and eyes that gleamed with unsettling clarity. He carried no weapon, yet his presence radiated power. Behind him, two more operatives stepped into view, each carrying strange devices resembling staffs tipped with crystalline nodes. Adrian stepped protectively in front of Layla. "Who are you? What is this place?" The man smiled faintly. "We are the keepers of Seshat, guardians of the knowledge men were never meant to wield. This vault is not merely a library, it is a prison. Those scrolls contain truths that fractured empires, destroyed cities, and nearly unmade the world." Layla's voice shook with anger. "You call it protection, but all you're doing is hoarding history. Knowledge belongs to everyone." The keeper's smile vanished. "Child, you speak as those before you spoke. The Ptolemies, the Romans, the scholars of Baghdad, all believed themselves worthy. And what did their arrogance bring? Fire, blood, collapse. The scrolls are not history. They are power. And power invites ruin." Adrian's pulse quickened. "Then why guard it? Why not destroy it entirely?" The keeper's eyes narrowed. "Because even destruction leaves echoes. Memory survives fire. To truly erase knowledge, it must be buried, hidden until the world itself forgets." And yet, his gaze hardened. "You and your kind keep digging. Always digging." Before Adrian could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. One of the stone statues surrounding the pedestal shifted, its granite arms grinding slowly upward as cracks of golden light spread across its surface. Layla gasped. "Adrian, it's moving." One by one, the statues stirred, ancient mechanisms awakening after centuries of slumber. The keepers stepped back, unshaken, as though expecting this. The leader spoke calmly. "The guardians recognize intruders. They will not stop until the vault is sealed again." Suddenly, one of the massive statues lurched forward, its obsidian blade raised high. Adrian grabbed Layla's arm and pulled her aside just as the sword cleaved into the stone floor, splitting it like paper. Chaos erupted. The operatives activated their crystalline staffs, releasing arcs of concentrated energy that slowed the statues' movements but did not stop them. The cavern shook as guardians advanced, their footsteps like thunder. Adrian's eyes darted to the pedestal. If the scroll was what the keepers feared most, then it might also be their key to understanding. Without thinking, he bolted toward it, weaving between the lumbering stone figures. One swung its blade down, narrowly missing his head, shards of rock exploding across the floor. Layla screamed his name, but Adrian pressed on, vaulting over a fallen slab until he reached the pedestal. His hands trembled as he lifted the scroll case. The instant he touched it, the entire chamber resonated with a deafening hum. The guardians froze mid-motion, their glowing cracks dimming slightly, as though awaiting command. Adrian felt a surge of heat pulse through his chest, spreading down his arms. The scroll case vibrated, humming with some inner force. He realized then, it wasn't just a container. It was a key. The keeper's voice rang out, sharp and furious. "You don't know what you're holding, Cole. Put it down before you doom us all." Adrian staggered back, clutching the case tightly. "What's inside it?" The keeper's eyes burned with intensity. "The Codex of Fire. The words of the first architects who bent the elements to their will. It was their arrogance that brought the flood, that shattered Babel, that reduced empires to ash. If you open it, the guardians will not stop with us. They will cleanse the world." Layla moved beside Adrian, her voice fierce. Or maybe they feared knowledge because it exposed their lies. Maybe this codex isn't a curse, maybe it's the truth. The cavern groaned as cracks split across the dome ceiling. Dust and rock rained down. The guardians raised their blades again, advancing toward Adrian and Layla now. The operatives scattered, shouting in panic. The keeper, however, stood firm, his eyes locked on Adrian. "You must choose. Hand it to me, and I will reseal the vault. Or keep it, and you'll unleash what your kind cannot control." Adrian's heart pounded as the scroll case burned hot in his grip, as though alive, as though it recognized the gravity of the moment. His mind raced. If the keeper was right, opening the codex could mean unleashing forces buried for millennia. But if he handed it over, it would vanish again into secrecy, lost to humanity forever. Layla's voice broke through his storm of thoughts. Adrian, whatever this is, it's what we came for. The truth doesn't stay buried. Not forever. The guardians closed in, their blades raised high, the chamber quaking with imminent collapse. Adrian made his choice. With a deep breath, he twisted the seal on the scroll case. The golden inlays flared brilliantly, and with a hiss, the case unlocked. Inside lay a roll of papyrus, impossibly preserved, its ink glowing faintly with fiery red symbols that writhed like living flame. The moment it was exposed, the guardians froze completely, their eyes dimming to darkness. The hum ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it made Adrian's skin crawl. Then, one by one, the sealed stone doors lining the outer corridor began to tremble. Dust spilled from their frames. Ancient locks groaned and clicked, as though awakening from eternal slumber. Layla's breath hitched. Adrian, you didn't just unlock one scroll. You've triggered all of them. The keeper's face twisted with horror. You fool, you've opened the vault. And from the darkness beyond the trembling doors came a sound, low, resonant, inhuman, like the collective whisper of 1,000 forgotten voices rising in unison. The whispering grew louder, layering into 1,000 indistinguishable voices, each overlapping the other, until it felt less like sound and more like pressure inside Adrian's skull. He stumbled backward, clutching the scroll case tightly, his knuckles white as the chamber vibrated beneath his feet. The crystalline lights embedded into the vaulted ceiling flared brilliantly, filling the room with blinding radiance. Then, as suddenly as it began, the whispering stopped. Silence descended. A silence so deep it felt unnatural, as though the very air were holding its breath. Layla gripped Adrian's arm. What did you do? Her voice was hoarse, fragile. Adrian shook his head, words failing him. All around them, the massive sealed doors lining the outer corridor stood ajar, revealing chambers beyond, each bathed in an eerie golden light. Inside, scroll racks, crystal tablets, and metallic cylinders floated in suspended animation, untouched by time. It wasn't just a library, it was a repository of impossible knowledge. The lost histories of entire civilizations stared back at them, preserved in a way modern science couldn't explain. The keeper of Seshat, however, didn't look odd. He looked terrified. He stepped forward slowly, his pale face taut with grim resolve. You've made a mistake, Dr. Cole, he said softly, his voice calm but edged with finality. This place was never meant to be opened. Do you understand now why we hid it? Adrian's breathing quickened as he turned to face him. You're wrong, he shot back, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. Knowledge isn't meant to rot in the dark. It belongs to the world. The keeper's expression hardened, and for the first time, his control faltered. The world, he said, almost bitterly. You speak as though humanity has earned this. But these scrolls are not stories. They're weapons. Maps to forces older than nations, instructions to build machines that collapse the fabric of reality itself. Do you think your governments would resist the temptation to use them? Do you think corporations wouldn't tear the world apart to own them? He gestured sharply toward the pedestal. Knowledge doesn't belong to the world, Dr. Cole. It belongs to those who can control it. Before Adrian could respond, the statues, the guardians, suddenly shifted again. But this time, they weren't advancing on Adrian. They were turning toward the keeper and his operatives. Their obsidian eyes glimmered faintly, reacting to something beyond human perception. The keeper stiffened, his voice low, almost reverent. They've recognized betrayal. Layla frowned, pulling Adrian aside. What does he mean? Adrian swallowed hard. I don't think they were programmed to protect the scrolls, he whispered, realization dawning. I think they were programmed to protect something else. Then, deep below the chamber, an immense rumble rose, and the ground splintered. A massive slab of stone shifted aside to reveal a spiraling descent into darkness, illuminated faintly by an otherworldly blue glow. The voices returned, but now they were coherent, their whispers forming fragments of languages Adrian didn't understand, yet somehow felt. The sensation was like memories being injected directly into his mind, symbols, constellations, equations, and diagrams flashing behind his eyelids faster than thought. He stumbled, gripping his temples, gasping for breath. Layla's hand steadied him, but her face was pale. Adrian, we need to leave. Now. The keeper's voice boomed across the chamber, carrying authority that brooked no argument. No one leaves, he declared. The seal has been broken. The pact is void. The codex will awaken the others. And as if summoned by his words, a low, rhythmic pulse filled the air, like a heartbeat, slow and deliberate. It came from below, from the depths of the spiral passage. With each pulse, the golden inscriptions along the walls shifted, glowing faintly as though alive. Then the guardians knelt, lowering their blades, and the great doors beyond the chamber began to open fully, revealing cavernous archives stretching beyond imagination. Inside, Adrian glimpsed artifacts that defied reason, scrolls suspended in spheres of liquid light, tablets carved from obsidian but etched with patterns resembling modern circuitry, and glass cylinders filled with swirling plasma that hummed faintly, as though holding captive storms. Layla whispered, This is thousands of years ahead of us. Adrian, this isn't just a library. It's a blueprint for a civilization far beyond anything we've ever known. But then the hum intensified into a roar, and the blue glow below became blinding. Something massive was rising from the depths. At first Adrian thought it was machinery, but then he saw movement, not mechanical, but organic. A colossal form emerged, smooth and featureless, its surface shimmering like liquid metal. Its shape shifted as though reality itself struggled to define it, and yet its presence radiated sentience. The keeper fell to his knees, head bowed low. The archivist, he whispered, trembling. Adrian and Layla exchanged horrified glances. What is it? Adrian demanded. The keeper looked up, his expression one of awe and dread intertwined. The first guardian, he said slowly. It was here when Alexandria was nothing but a fishing village. It taught our ancestors to write, to measure the stars, to build their empires, and when they grew arrogant, it destroyed them. The being spoke, not in sound, but directly into their minds. A voice like crashing waves, ancient and resonant. The cycle begins anew. Adrian staggered back, gripping the codex tightly. What cycle? He whispered aloud, though no one had spoken. The archivist's form rippled, and suddenly images cascaded into Adrian's consciousness. Visions of the library burning, of armies clashing, of knowledge passed and lost across millennia. Empires rising, falling, consumed by the very discoveries they uncovered. Over and over again, the realization hit Adrian like a physical blow. It's a failsafe, he breathed. The library isn't lost because of accidents or conquest. It's designed to disappear, every time humanity comes too close. Layla stared at him, stricken. Then why leave it here at all? The archivist's voice reverberated within them all. Knowledge must persist, but power must remain chained. One cannot exist without the other. Before Adrian could reply, the keeper stood, his expression resolute. Then we must reseal the codex before it awakens the entire archive. But Adrian shook his head violently. No, the world deserves to know. We can't keep living blind, repeating the same mistakes because we're denied the truth. Layla grabbed his wrist, her voice urgent. Adrian, think. If this is bigger than empires, bigger than history itself, we can't just throw it into the world. Imagine if the wrong hands. Suddenly, the archivist's form shifted violently, and the heartbeat-like pulse became erratic, destabilizing the chamber around them. Chunks of stone fell from the ceiling, crashing to the floor. The scroll case in Adrian's hands burned hot, the glowing red symbols shifting like fire given form. The keeper shouted above the chaos, You must choose, Dr. Cole. Seal it, or unleash it. Adrian hesitated, his breath ragged, every muscle trembling. He looked at Layla, at the archivist, at the endless chambers full of secrets that could rewrite human history. He thought about the wars, the greed, the manipulation. But he also thought about progress, understanding, and the possibility of breaking the cycle once and for all. He raised the codex high. And then, darkness. A shockwave of blinding light ripped through the chamber, and for an instant, everything ceased, sound, movement, thought itself. When Adrian opened his eyes, he was lying on the wet stone floor at the vault's entrance, Layla beside him, unconscious but breathing. The doors behind them were sealed tight, the golden inscriptions dimmed to lifeless stone. The chamber was gone, as though it had never existed. The codex, too, was gone. In the silence that followed, Adrian stared into the darkness, his mind racing with fragments of the archivist's words. The cycle begins anew. And somewhere deep beneath Alexandria, something ancient waited, patient as stone, for the next time humanity grew too curious for its own good.